Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this very special event in the annual Life of the Harris Centre, and we like to believe for the province. The 2021 launch of the 7th edition of Newfoundland and Labrador's Vital Signs in partnership with the Community Foundation of Canada. I'm Rob Greenwood, Associate Vice President, Public Engagement and External Relations, and Director of the Harris Centre at Memorial University. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that the lands on which Memorial University's campuses are situated are in the traditional territories of diverse Indigenous groups. And we acknowledge with respect the histories and cultures of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of this province. We encourage everyone to reflect on these lands from where you are located this morning and to consider the Indigenous peoples for whom these lands are traditional territory. Newfoundland and Labrador's Vital Signs is more than just a report. It is the beginning of an ongoing process of discussions and research about the health of the province across several key areas, which I'll outline for you in just a moment. In the preparation of this report, the Harris Centre facilitated many conversations with a wide range of groups, and these conversations informed additional research by our own statisticians and analysts in areas that needed a closer look. In today's challenging economic landscape, putting relevant, accessible research and data into the hands of community leaders from the boardroom table to the kitchen table is even more critical. So let's get started. Pulling up our slides, which we'll walk through here. I'm here with Kathy Newhook and Jamie Ward from the Harris Centre, and they'll collaborate with me in a Q&A at the end. So Vital Signs, as many of you know, is a national program created by the Community Foundations of Canada. It was started by the Toronto Foundation 20 years ago. Now we think we're the best in the country, of course. In Newfoundland and Labrador, the Vital Signs report is produced through a partnership between Memorial University's Harris Centre and the Community Foundation of Newfoundland and Labrador. And it's been a great relationship right from the beginning. The publication aims to identify key areas of interest in the province, issues we might be struggling with, things that are changing, as well as inspiring examples of innovation and perseverance. Each year, we spend months listening and paying attention to what's going on in our province, talking to experts at the university and in our communities, identifying the issues that are top of mind for people or issues that should be top of mind. Utilizing the resources at Memorial University and our many community partners, we pull together statistics and infographics, expert explanations and insights, as well as stories that help us see the full picture of what is going on in our province. Of course, we could never see the full picture in one 16-page report. So each year we shift the focus slightly so more and more areas can be examined over time. And all the previous reports are still on the website, and people I know keep them on their desks for active reference on an ongoing basis. Our goal is to put independent, relevant, and readable information in the hands of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians to create informed discussion, fuel civic engagement, and spark innovative ideas. Through a unique partnership with Saltwire, we are able to put all of this information directly into the hands of people around the province through Saltwire's community newspaper distribution system. We are also hoping that you will be able to put the report to good use. Start conversations in your communities, pass on the information, learn more, and take action. And if you would like more copies of the report, you can get in touch with us or check it out online. We'll post the link in the chat box. An annual favorite, going back to our very first edition, I think in 2014, is a village of 100. If Newfoundland and Labrador was a village of 100, what would it look like? And the numbers, of course, all really reflect percentages, but it helps you wrap your head around it in terms of 100. And the size of the bubbles are all in relation to their percentage. And this year it looks at breakdown age breakdown and geographic distribution of our population. Out of 100, 45 people, 45% live in towns with less than 5,000 people. 43 people are living in towns with over 10,001 people, including 21 in St. John's. We have more we'll talk about later in the discussion about some of the impacts of so many small communities with their own municipal governments and the need for more regional cooperation, and something we've talked about in previous vital signs. 46 people, when you look at demographics, would be age 50 or over. 46 of 100 would be age 50 or over. If you compare to our last vital signs, our first vital signs in 2014, for the population 65 plus, we went from 16 out of 100 to 22. We also have some insights into our population's diversity. Out of 100, we would have 2 visible minorities. We would have 2 immigrants. And 9 would be Indigenous, based on people who state that they are Indigenous on their census form. We then move to the economy section, and we show a breakdown of provincial government revenues. Nearly 1/4 of provincial government revenues comes from personal income tax. Just under 6% comes from corporate income tax. Nearly 21% comes from provincial sales tax. Just over 10%, about 567 million, comes from offshore oil revenues. And that's a topic that will come up again as we go through here. And over 16%, nearly 900 million, comes from federal sources. So even though we no longer get equalization, the federal funding is still a significant piece of the puzzle for Newfoundland's finances. In terms of provincial government expenditures, our biggest expense, no surprise, is the healthcare sector at 40.5%. K-12 education is just over 11%. So is the general government sector at 11%. Post-secondary is 5.2%. Interest paid on government debt is 9.5%. We've been through a difficult, challenging couple of years. We've suffered through COVID, but retail sales are recovering significantly. Not in the chart, as the data is hot off the press, but retail sales from this past summer are some of the highest we've seen. Perhaps some of the pent up and also all the online and hopefully more and more local shopping. We have an expert column from Dr. David Freshwater, Professor Emeritus at the University of Kentucky and a longtime Harris Center collaborator. David's been a great collaborator with Alvin Sims from our geography department and Jamie Ward here in the Harris Center with our RAN Lab group, Regional Analytics Lab, and we'll draw on their work throughout the report. David, in his section of the report, talks about new approaches to regional development and diversification, and he focuses on the need for innovation, something we're all talking about these days, but how a lot of it is not necessarily cutting edge technologies for regions like Newfoundland and Labrador, but rather how smaller incremental innovation to processes can be a big difference in a small economy, and putting existing technologies to new uses. So that's a really important insight, I think, that every firm, every organization in the province can put to use. We have a paper from Dr. Freshwater and our RAN Lab team out in the near future. So stay tuned for that. Further on then in the economy section, the report looks at how aquaculture, fishery, and tourism industries are doing. All industries with big rural impact. Each industry took a clear hit during the peak of the pandemic, but have been recovering for the most part. The aquaculture sector had a significant reduction in both production and volume in 2020. The capture fishery also saw a reduction, but landed value has increased significantly in 2021, mainly due to the increase in price for certain species. The tourism chart looks at the data a little differently. This is a new StatsCan indicator to see how the tourism industry is doing relative to pre-pandemic performance. The baseline is 2019 performance, and you can see that the industry has not returned to pre-pandemic performance, but has improved slightly since the peak of the global pandemic. And numbers for this past summer are not included in this calculation yet. Next up in the economy, we look at housing starts over the last few years. They decreased between 2017 and 2020, and the vast majority are now single detached houses. Mining and quarrying steadily increased from 2015 to 19, and there's still lots of potential in this industry, as we all know. With climate change, electric cars, and other demands for batteries, we'll see mining in Labrador and on the island has long-term growth potential. Offshore oil production took a big hit in 2019 and 2020, with oil prices reaching record lows. Of course, that has increased in 2021 and is now back up around $81 per barrel. There's an expert column in Vital Signs from Max Rulock, former head of the CNLOPB and of the Harris Centre Advisory Board. And he is speaking on the future of oil in the face of climate change. How long Newfoundland and Labrador can continue to benefit from the oil and gas industry with the global energy transition is a question on the minds of many people. Max highlights what other jurisdictions are doing to cut GHG emissions, which are absolutely critical to achieve ASAP. And he notes how that can be done in the oil industry in the meantime, while the transition continues. And there's great debate as to how long a transition that's going to be. We had a great session with our Forecast NL series recently with Max and Dr. Angela Carter, and you can view that on our website. Then we move to the community section, and we take a look at communities around the province. As noted in our population of 100 chart, you can see over half the pie are communities under 10,000 people. In our 2016 Vital Signs, we highlighted the work of RANLab on population projections by functional economic region, basically labor market areas. So while we can look at the population of all the individual communities, it's key to understand our communities as regions, where people travel from their community to another community for work, to shop, to go to school, for healthcare, etc. But our municipal structure limits local governments to a single dot on the map. And we're working a lot with municipalities, Newfoundland and Labrador, the Community Business Development Corporation Association, with the Provincial Department of Municipal Provincial Affairs. A lot of work being done on that these days. We also look at the ongoing, interesting, challenging, sometimes hopeful question of migration. Interprovincial migration in 2019 to 20, more people left the province to move to other places in Canada. But we have a nice story there about someone who came home during the pandemic. And we're hearing lots of stories in the media these days about a return or new people coming to Atlantic Canada to escape high housing prices, or maybe in the midst of the pandemic, wanting a reset in their life. And we're seeing some of that in the Newfoundland and Labrador case, some early encouraging numbers, but still early days to get a good handle on whether that's a trend and also to understand the composition of those numbers. Is it baby boomers returning to the province who would have in any case, but the pandemic helped move it quicker? Is it younger families, as is indicated in the story we have in Vital Signs? And are we getting some of those people from elsewhere in the country and beyond, not from here, but attracted by the quality of life here? So encouraging, still some way to go before we need to know the real trends. We didn't include international immigration this year. That was a big focus in past years of Vital Signs, and I'm sure we'll come back to it again. But international immigration has been hovering around 1,500 people per year over the last few years, but it was only 885 in 2020-21, likely due to the pandemic and all the challenges of travel. In terms of poverty, which has been an ongoing theme in Vital Signs from the beginning, this year we looked at food bank usage in the province. 59% of food banks in the province reported an increase in the number of visits in 2019 over previous years. Given the past year we've had, that number may be even more for 2020. nearly 11,000 visits, with over 3,000 of those including children. Consistent with those numbers, the majority of food bank visitors are single people, 53%. Nearly 1/4 are single parent families. The same trend exists for people who are food insecure. Nearly 15% of households in Newfoundland and Labrador are food insecure. That's 2% higher than the national average. About 1/4 of people living alone are food insecure. Slightly higher for women, 25.6% of women living alone, 22.3% of men living alone. Nearly 46% of single females with children are food insecure. 16% of single males with children are food insecure. Meanwhile, household disposable income has increased by nearly $20,000 per household since 2010. Household disposable income is defined as the income remaining after taxes are paid in a household. This really highlights the gap in economic well-being in our population. Many families are enjoying higher incomes than ever, while 15% are food insecure. Those present real challenges for us as a people and a province, and it's a gap that's increasingly apparent throughout the Western world, leading to lots of discussions around guaranteed annual income and new innovative approaches. So we'll have lots more on that as we go forward. We also wanted to highlight a really important issue that has come to light over the last number of years more and more, with a lot of attention on truth and reconciliation and the treatment of Indigenous peoples in Canada. We've included a list of things that people can do to take action, very proactive, specific, that each individual family can do. We've also included information about each of the Indigenous groups in Newfoundland and Labrador to help us as we engage in truth and reconciliation in this province. Our next slide highlights something that we've been talking about, and many of my team are laughing here because I've been talking about. Harris Centre is going on 18 years now. And from the very beginning, I thought it would be really powerful to have a chart that showed Newfoundland and Labrador since Confederation. And we've done lots of work with our RANLab team and with our team in-house and collaborating with others. Dr. Doug May was a key collaborator for many years, helping develop ideas around a State of the Province report. And so Kathy Newhook and the team on Vital Signs created this as our centerfold. And we have it available on a glossy printout that people can order, or just let us know and we'll send it to you. And while the information certainly doesn't tell the whole story, and looking at it on screen, it's very busy. But when you get a larger sheet or when you look at it in Vital Signs, it gives us and it's also available online. It enables us to consider our history as we forge ahead to face our current challenges and the next 75 years. We are in the 75th anniversary since the Constitutional Convention of Newfoundland joining Canada. We like to say Canada joining Newfoundland. And so this really helped us highlight this series of trends, highlights the Newfoundland and Labrador, economic and political, consistent with the Harris Centre mandate. We think it is something that can be on offices all over the province, classrooms all over the province, or wherever. One striking detail, as we look at along the bottom of the chart, is median age of Newfoundlanders since Confederation. In the median age is 50% or above, 50% or below. In the early 1960s, the median age of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians was around 19 years. By the 1980s, this had increased to 25 years. We were still a very young population. And then by the end of the 1990s, it had jumped again, this time to 38 years. 38 years old as the median. Today, in 2020, latest numbers here on this chart, the median age of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians is 47 years, for an increase of 28 years in the past 6 decades. speaks for itself. The pink line on the chart follows the unemployment rate, which is an eternal topic of focus in our province and comparing to other provinces. And of course, a very seasonal economy. Lots of talk over the years about the unemployment insurance system and 1042, potential of a guaranteed annual income. When we look at the unemployment rate since Confederation, it reached an all-time low in 1951. Before maybe some of those trends with 1042 had taken firm hold under Confederation, when all the construction projects were happening, and an all-time high in 1984. We've seen many rises and falls over the years, but you can see a clear downward trajectory since 1994. And with our demographics and the increasing reality of labor shortages, I expect that to continue. The next line, the green one, follows GDP per capita. And lots of folks highlight the danger of using GDP as a measure of prosperity, and that's absolutely the case. But it is a universally used measure of wealth in the economy, and per capita shows it obviously in proportion to the number of people in the province. It has been rising steadily, but you can see a significant jump once we started producing oil in the late 90s. And you can debate the impact of oil and gas in terms of employment in proportion to GDP, on regional distribution of the wealth within the province. We know it's had lots of impact on the supply chain in our province, on the construction sector, but as GDP per capita, as we look at transition going forward, it's going to be very interesting as oil and gas over the next decades, maybe sooner, maybe longer, becomes less of a part of our economy. Peaking in 2008, just before the global financial crisis. So stay tuned on that one in terms of GDP overall per capita. The orange line follows household income per capita. This represents the average household income over the total population. And you know, when we look at that trend, steadily upward, leveling off a little bit in the last few years with the downturn in oil and gas and some of the spending by the provincial government, there is a lot of romanticism about life in Newfoundland and Labrador before Confederation. And our amazing culture, our music, our identity, our connection to nature is all rooted in that. But there was also a lot of poverty throughout our province. And that steady gain in household income per capita is something we all should be proud of. And there's been a lot of work, and I've been involved in a lot of work over the years of small jurisdictions and whether they should be independent or whether they're better off in a large jurisdiction. And the research is pretty clear. You want to maximize your autonomy within a larger jurisdiction. And the proof is in the pudding there on household income per capita. The blue line, less promising, is total public debt per capita. It has risen significantly over time, but even more rapidly since 2013 with the Muskrat Falls project. The CARE initiative, led by our economics department at Memorial, Collaborative Applied Research in Economics, recently held a conference on the provincial fiscal situation. Some there thought we were close to bankrupt, however you define that for a Canadian province. Others thought, as a percent of GDP, it was manageable. With oil and gas contributing so much to GDP and pressure with climate change to diversify away from oil and gas, we will be challenged to find a substitute if you're counting on debt to GDP as an indicator of us being able to manage the debt we have. More on that in a moment. And then along the top of the graph, you can see the premiers and political parties that were in power throughout the time since Confederation. Each premier and government faced forces out of their control, and each contributed to the conditions we face. positive and negative. Scattered throughout the chart are various important dates in the history of our province, mostly related to our economic and political development, or a lack thereof. Don't want to be too facetious here. We could not include them all, obviously, but tried to choose events that had significant social, political, or economic impact. We'd love to hear what you think should have been included, and this chart will evolve. I'd love to see a new one issued every 5 years. Kathy cringes as I speak. And with Jamie, we were talking about, this can easily be moved to online and over time do different versions for different aspects of our province. So we're very proud of this piece of work, but it's the first cut. Look forward to the conversation it inspires. Next up, a whole area of focus for the Harris Centre over the last year or so and continuing for the next year or so is our Climate, Economy and Society Forecast NL series. In January, we launched it as the latest series of public policy programming with a focus on the impact climate change is having on the province, taking into account the intersection of environment, economy, and society. All too often, folks are concerned about climate change, as we all need to be, but with their particular focus on environmental issues, on economic issues, on social issues. But as a people, as a place, we have to look at these as they intersect. We've had 6 public sessions so far in the past 8 months, and we have a dedicated online forum where discussions can and are happening between concerned citizens from all ages and all regions of Newfoundland and Labrador. We established a citizens forum where people were asked to nominate themselves, and it's demographically representative from the regions, the peoples, the ages around the province. And they're engaging on all of those sessions, but our online forum is open to everybody. And of course, all our sessions are open to everybody. Most recently, as mentioned, we look closely at the future of the oil and gas industry in the province. And we have a special feature in Vital Signs from our Forecast NL Steering Committee members and our community partners. One of the key things we can expect to see in coming decades is temperature change. In these charts, you can see projected temperature increases for Newfoundland's island portion and Labrador. While temperatures are projected to increase everywhere in the province by 2070, Labrador will see the highest change temperatures. In some places, seasonal temperatures in Labrador will be the same as current seasonal temperatures in St. John's, with projected increases of up to 12 degrees Celsius in the winter months. Those are some of the most dramatic changes pretty much anywhere in the world. Something else we can expect a lot of in Newfoundland and Labrador is precipitation. Certainly the weather these days indicates that. While much of the world suffers through drought and forest fires, with the way the trends are affecting us and are predicted to, we're expecting more precipitation. These charts show how every community in Newfoundland and Labrador will experience more rain and snow, and some of that will be extreme weather, as we've already felt, with as much as 1 extra millimeter falling per day in Newfoundland and Labrador in the winter and spring months. This year's Vital Signs, as part of this Forecast NL section, features op-eds from many climate change experts. We have one on the slide earlier with journalist Ashley Fitzpatrick. We also have experts from Memorial, Dr. Joel Finnis from our geography department, on the importance of action and how up until now we have failed to take the actions that are necessary to mitigate and adapt to climate change. We also hear from Dr. Brad DeYoung, a leading expert in physical oceanography in the world. Dr. DeYoung talks to us about the changes we can expect to see in our oceans, including increased acidity and decreased food production. Finally, Kieran Hanley, the executive director of EcoNext, used to be called Newfoundland and Labrador Environmental Industry Association. EcoNext is the industry association that represents those firms in the province that deal with environmental challenges as an economic opportunity. And Kieran shares with readers the future of green jobs in Newfoundland and Labrador, stating his belief that we, as Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, can be industry leaders in this energy transition. We also hone in on the particular impacts of climate change in Labrador. Our province's north coasts will face the most changes with regard to climate change, already indicated. As we stated, temperatures in Labrador will rise to match those currently experienced in St. John's. And as much as we may complain about the weather in St. John's, we actually have very moderate temperatures compared to the rest of Canada. Nain's winter temperatures are projected to be only 1.5 degrees cooler than St. John's in the winter and nearly identical in the summer. This is dramatic. We can see specifically that Nain's temperatures are projected to change from the current average of minus 15 degrees Celsius in the winter as an average to minus 5 degrees Celsius in the winter in the year 2100. That's a change of 10 degrees average over 80 years. We can also see that the projected number of thaw days is set to dramatically increase by 2050 and 2100, especially in the spring and fall. Nain, for example, can expect 4 times as many thaw days in April. This will have, and is already having, significant impacts on people living in Labrador, limiting their ability to hunt and travel in the wintertime and spring especially. Building on that, we have an article looking at the impacts of climate change on the people of Labrador. Dr. Ashley Consolo, Dean of Memorial's new School of Arctic and Subarctic Studies at Memorial's Labrador Institute, discusses a documentary she produced a few years ago, Lament for the Land. This documentary can be found online and is very informative and moving. You really should watch it. Some of the quotes there on the screen, it demonstrates the real impact on Inuit people, their way of life and identity. Forecast NL continues all this winter and spring and will culminate with several synthesis papers and a conference for next fall. So get engaged, take part, it's really important. Next up in vital signs is health and wellness. Unfortunately, Newfoundland and Labrador has the lowest provincial ranking for many of the key non-medical and social determinants of health in Canada. This information comes directly from the Health Accord of Newfoundland and Labrador interim report. Almost 56% of Canadians eat vegetables once a day. Only 34% of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians do. Alcohol use and smoking are also more common in Newfoundland and Labrador. While 19% of Canadians are noted as heavy drinkers, 27% of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians are. Fewer Newfoundland and Labrador women breastfeed than the Canadian averages. All of this means that Newfoundland and Labrador ranks 10th out of 10, the 10 provinces, in all of these categories. Newfoundland and Labrador also ranks lowest in terms of unemployment rate, with almost 14% of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians unemployed compared to the 6% Canadian average. Again, as noted, Newfoundland and Labrador has that exposure to seasonal industries. So the traditional challenge with the unemployment system, but that 14% continues to be a sticky percentage, much higher than the Canadian average. We'll see where it goes over time. And employment is a key factor in being healthy, consistent with the social determinants of health. However, there are some positives. Newfoundland and Labrador ranks number 1 out of 10 in 2 important categories. 78% of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians claim strong feelings of belonging in their communities versus a 69% average for Canada, the rest of Canada. Newfoundland and Labradorians also have the lowest percentage of folks feeling extremely stressed. So in all these health indicators, we're not very healthy, but we don't seem to be too worried about it. There is something about the Newfoundland and Labrador identity and culture, which is a good thing, but we have to tackle those health issues. So while the Canadian average on stress is 21% in terms of extremely stressed, for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, it's only 15%. We are seeing our special way of life continue in this province. People who move here see it and value it. We are seeing continued return migration of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. And I think those factors around belonging and stress are a key part of it. But we have to improve our health indicators for our own sakes and to reduce healthcare costs. And the work of Dr. Parfrey and Sister Elizabeth Davis and that task force is really key to coming up with new approaches. Continuing on then with health and wellness. We spend a lot of money on our healthcare system. While healthcare spending per capita is approximately $4,500 per capita in Canada, on average, Newfoundland and Labrador spends about $6,000 per capita, the highest amount out of all 10 provinces. So our outcome challenges aren't because of lack of spending. We have a big territory, but other provinces also have enormous territories. The shortage of family doctors is something that's been in the news a lot lately. According to an NLMA survey in 2019, 19% of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians stated they were without a family doctor. This works out to almost 100,000 Newfoundlanders and Labradorians without a family doctor. And we know that while there are 629 licensed family physicians in the province, there are only 431 family physicians in full-time patient care at the community level. Now, counting doctors, as we've learned over the last few years with vital signs, is not as easy as you'd like to think. Some work part-time, are mostly retired, but are still licensed. Others are licensed family physicians, but work in other areas of the healthcare system, not in full-time family medicine practice. There's lots in the news on all of this these days. Let's hope new approaches and solutions are found. This year's Vital Signs also features stories about Sequence Bio and Dr. Janine Hubbard. The folks at Sequence Bio talk to us about their work in identifying which genes are connected to diseases in order to dramatically improve the way that medications are prescribed and used in our province. There's a Health Innovation Summit with Eastern Health on today, and there's loads of great work happening on innovation in that sector. We spend a lot of money on our healthcare, talked about that, and we need that innovation to get better healthcare and to save money. Dr. Hubbard talked to us about the consequences of COVID-19 on our population in terms of mental health services. While there has been an exponential increase in the demand for psychological services in the past 18 months, there has not been an increase in the number of working psychologists in the province, which means more stress on the psychologists themselves. COVID is impacting us all in ways that are obvious and some that are less obvious. We all need to take that into account for ourselves, our families, and our communities. The next section gives us more insight into COVID. We have a timeline of events because it's all been a bit of a blur. It has for me over the last couple of years. So this timeline is really helpful, showing the events for the past 18 months. Since the first case of COVID-19 was reported in the province in March 2020. We have witnessed schools being closed, the province shutting its borders to anyone outside of the Atlantic bubble, masks being made mandatory, then not, then being mandatory again, as the science, as the evidence changes over time. New variants arriving, and then vaccinations. MQR Research surveyed Newfoundlanders and Labradorians in October 2020, so a year ago, and asked them to think about how concerned they were about certain topics. 57% of those working were worried about job security. 77% were worried about access to healthcare, while 78% specifically worried about the mental health impacts of COVID-19. However, while there were many challenges and worries, many also found some silver linings. For many folk, it's kind of a reset. 67% of those surveyed said they were glad to be able to spend more time on their hobbies, while 64% were happy to be able to spend more time with their families. Of course, many people didn't have families close to them, so it depends on your situation. Well over a third said they felt more connected to their community during the lockdown measures. And 43% even stated they felt their lifestyle became more healthy. So COVID-19 had a dramatic impact on our province. And in some of that, the next slide indicates the impact on certain economic sectors, especially tourism and hospitality and business in general. We saw an 81% drop in international travelers, with a 95% drop in domestic travelers from the end of 2019 to the end of 2020. No wonder tourism and hospitality have been impacted so hard. Businesses in general were greatly impacted. We saw 44% of businesses in the province laying off at least one person during the pandemic, as businesses of all sizes. 55% of medium and large businesses laid off at least one person. This number was slightly lower for small business, but in proportion, the impact is greater. 32% of businesses with 4 or fewer staff laid off at least one person, or 25 to 50% of their workforce. We have a lovely story about pivoting in COVID of one small rural business moving online. Every business, every organization, every person is grappling with the new reality shaped by COVID, in addition to all the other changes and pre-existing factors we all face. In our economy, society, and environment, there's so much in flux. We hope that this Vital Signs provides some insight, some context, and some inspiration. I have lots of thank yous, but before we do that, we have time for some questions. We've got about 15 minutes or so. Jamie Ward and Kathy Newhook are here with me. They're closer to some of the data and some of the items in, but I'm also happy. You can text, go onto the Q&A or the chat function and let us know if you have any questions or comments, and we'll do our best to answer them. Kathy, anything coming in there so far?
There is one question coming in about the percentage of the 98,000 people without a family doctor, that how many of those live on the Northeast Avalon. That isn't a number that we have at the ready. I do believe that the NLMA has some of those numbers potentially broken down by region, but I would have to check on that to make sure.
And that would be a good one, because every year with Vital Signs, we're keen to get input on next year's Vital Signs. So maybe we could drill into that some more next year, because I'm sure with the task force report and the government response, there's going to be a lot more discussion on that front. So thanks for that question. Any other questions or comments, Kathy?
There is another question there, a nice and easy one, about where we can get access to the document. And of course, you can access the document online through the Harris Centre website. And I think that link has just been posted on there. But you can also pick it up in your newspaper this weekend. It'll be in the Telegram on Saturday, and it will be in the community newspapers around the province in whatever day that happens to come out in your particular area. It'll be in that newspaper. It may appear in the flyer bags in some of those areas as well, so make sure you check your flyer bag. And if you're in town, you can pop by Signal Hill campus, and we'll have some some copies out front. You can just grab a copy yourself, and we may end up dropping them off to cafes and coffee shops around town as we get a chance to be able to do that over the next few days.
Great. Thanks, Kathy. And another thing we do, as Kathy mentioned, a bunch of us, not so much these days, travel around the province with our work. And we always take bundles of vital signs. And I've traveled across the province endlessly for the last 17 years. Left a bundle at the Deer Lake Irving one year. And one of our colleagues was back with his family for a holiday, saw it, and he says this, he was inspired by vital signs to move back home. And he's now working in a sustainability office at Memorial. So we love that story, a direct impact. More questions there, Kathy?
Yeah, if you take the seasonal worker out of the equation, what would the employment rate be?
My guess would be it would be the same as the national average. And of course, we're not alone in seasonal workers. Throughout rural Canada, seasonal workers are a reality. I think it's more pronounced in the fishery in Atlantic Canada than certainly in agriculture, because so much of the agriculture is family farms and they're more a proprietor, is my recollection. Jamie, do you have any thoughts or opinions on that one?
No, I think that you handled it really well. I think that when you break down things by demographics too, you can get very close to the national average for different groups as well.
And it is the case, I know, that in the Northeast Avalon, the St. John's metropolitan region, most of our stats are very similar to national urban centers. So it is largely a rural industry reality around fishery. Traditionally, forestry is still a big industry, not as big as it was in this province. And tourism, of course. There are the perennial challenges of appropriate income supports for seasonal workers, and that debate continues. Any other questions or comments there, Kathy?
Yeah, there's a question there in the chat. Is there a plan to quantify the cost of climate change to the province?
Oh, that's a great one. And again, with our Forecast NL series, we have a steering committee of experts at Memorial University and from community and industry associations and the like. We have a knowledge mobilization committee that includes all the various organizations with a stake in this. And we have the ongoing series of sessions. So Kathy, anything in particular on that one come up to your recollection, or maybe it's something we can put to our team?
I think it's definitely something we could put to the team. I can say, as much as I don't know what the cost is, I know that is an extremely complicated question. So once you start, I'm sure Jamie would agree, once you start trying to put a cost number on anything, it's hard to do that. But it is a really interesting question. I think a lot of the materials and the discussions coming out of the Forecast NL series will help shed a little bit of light on all of those various costs. And we can maybe take a look at if there is someone at the university who could help us put together a cost for that. But it's a very big cost, I'm sure. And it really depends on what you'd include in that.
And one of the challenges in that, as Kathy says, is just getting numbers on so many scenarios, because so much of it is not clearly predictable. But I also know, a couple of the associates of the Harris Center, Mark Shrimpton and Dr. Keith Story, former head of the geography department at Memorial, do a lot of work on economic impact assessment, for example. And often impact assessments are skewed to the negative. And a lot of the work Mark in particular has looked at, absolutely, we need to look at the key environmental impacts, also the social impacts and some of the intangibles, but also what are the upsides of some of the, when you're talking economic impact of a particular development of a mine or an oil and gas field. With climate change, when you look at the opportunity for green transition, when you look at the tech sector in the St. John's region, which is booming, there's new GEM CBC series or item on Silicon Island. There's upsides if we adjust. And there are also fascinating factors. We look at the very scary impacts of extreme weather, the impacts of acidification in the ocean if we don't address it, but also things like with changing in water temperatures, the lobster population is growing significantly, I'm given to understand, in Newfoundland waters. So there's growth industries. Agriculture is moving north. So we really need to factor in all those aspects. Any other questions, Kathy, comments there?
Yeah, there's another question there about food bank usage. So wondering if there's any stats on food bank usage in 2020. This comes in from Robin. She says, I would imagine Food First potentially has some more recent data that would show a much bigger increase from the 2019 data in the presentation. And I can say there may be 2020 data available now. I'm not sure, but I'd be right there with you, Robin, to think that that number has gone up because of all the challenges that we faced in the last year.
And our team is always looking for the latest data. So much of it, there's a time lag. So we'll be looking at that again next year for sure. But welcome anyone if they have more updated data, you can post it to the site there. Other comments, questions?
One last question there. Will this document be presented to the provincial government? Great resource and awesome work once again. So thanks for the compliment there too.
Well, absolutely. And thank you so much. And we collaborate very closely with all orders of government, federal, provincial, municipal, Indigenous, in all our work. And we always provide a copy of vital signs to key deputy ministers with departments that relate to vital signs a day or two before we release it. We work with provincial and federal and other government staff throughout the process where they have data or information that helps inform the issues we're working on. And this year, in the past, we normally have not sought government support for vital signs. We really emphasize the independence of the work, and Harris Centre often partners with governments, industry, community, and our brand, as written up behind me, is all about integrity and independence and a practical application in the province. But the provincial government did support our Forecast NL series, and so some of that support went into vital signs this year. But absolutely, we make sure this gets to our government partners and they respond very positively to it. Sometimes they pick us up on items they thought we could have framed differently. And look, we're always open to improving what we do here, and we're already thinking about next year. I think that's probably all the time we have for now, Kathy, or anything burning there?
There's one more question there, and we do have a few minutes.
All right.
So we've got a question. Immigration plays a big role in the economic growth of the province. Do you guys have any current data or forecast on that, as well as are we finally allowing international travelers?
So I'm not up on the latest travel data on international. I don't know if you know it, Kathy. Jamie would be able to speak to probably a little bit more on the immigrant data and some of the latest indications. Jamie, did you want to speak to that?
I could speak off the top of my head what I know.
Yeah.
No, one of the big trends lately has been, I found the accessibility, sort of the access of the data has been speeding up a good bit, it certainly appears. And yeah, I mean, through the pandemic, we've noticed a lot of volatility. Rob mentioned for the interprovincial migrants, it was down for a bit, now it's up again. So we are actively monitoring this. This is an actively month to month. It's always exciting when the data comes out. For international migrants, off the top of my head, I'm not sure. But yes, in our projections, in our scenario models that we do produce, it's a very important component of finding these numbers of these families and people that move in and support the growth here.
And we also recently had a Memorial Presents session, which you can see on the Harris Centre website, and 2 reports that were released where we partnered with Dr. Tony Fang in the Department of Economics at Memorial and his team, and with Mike Clare, who wrote a really valuable primer on navigating the immigration system in Newfoundland and Labrador. And we partnered with the Future Skills Center nationally on that session. And that session is recorded and on the Harris Center website. So lots of really good insights on state of the art relating to immigration in our province. And some of the data is in those reports also. Time for any last questions or any there that we can address, Kathy?
We've got about 5 minutes. So, and there's a few questions that have come in. If we don't get to all of them, my apologies. You can always reach out to us after the fact and we'll try and shed some light on whatever we can. Another question there. Can you expand on the slide which included construction as the top industry and the importance of new projects to the economy, as well as the aging workforce and the importance of training skilled trades as we move forward?
Well, that's a tangly one. Construction obviously is linked to provincial government spending when you're talking about infrastructure and major developments such as the new facility in St. John's with the replacement of the Waterford Hospital, for example. The Muskrat Falls project, as controversial as it is, was an enormous construction project with thousands of person years of employment. We've had oil and gas construction related projects over the last decade or so. And all that is contingent on a skilled workforce and produces many, many jobs and enormous wealth for the economy. But we also know we have the demographic situation of an aging workforce. I don't have the specific number off the top of my head, but the average age of a skilled tradesperson in Newfoundland and Labrador, I know, is into the 50s, if not the 60s. There are many young people entering the field, but as with our population demographics in general, not near enough to replace the numbers that are exiting as they retire. And when we look at our fertility rates, they're not at the level to replace. We don't have the immigration levels in Canada as a whole. If it wasn't for immigration, we have more deaths than births based on fertility rates. And so across the economy, including the construction trades, so much has to focus on productivity gains, new ways of doing business. We're seeing in mining and oil and gas and the work of the ocean supercluster, in the fishery, in aquaculture, in marine transportation, the importance of digitalization, of remote operations. There are going to be fewer workers in our economy out of necessity. I always quote Gilbert Lindstedt, I think it was in last year Vital Signs, from the Labrador Fishermen's Union Shrimp Company on the coast of Labrador Straits, who used to say he got hell from his workers when he used to talk about automation, because you're removing jobs. And he says now, unless he automates, he can't save jobs. So I think when we look at the future of the construction industry in this province, we have to look at how we do more with less. And we need to think about, are we going to have the numbers in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years to focus on big construction projects related to oil and gas or green tech? Or do we want to move further up the expertise chain and focus on those higher end jobs? There are small places on planet Earth, small population places that are leaders in the quality of life. You don't have to be big to succeed, but you do have to be productive, efficient, and smart. And I think across our sectors, that's a reality. Jamie, you have something quick to add there?
I'm just going to add something super quick. With trades in particular, and with a lot of these occupations, detail is really important. There's a lot of diversity when you look at one trade versus another, and one place versus another in the province. And we're seeing so much more diversity in the data coming out. And so it's just something that we're very excited that we're able to keep track of now. The Canadian Occupational Projection System from the federal government has a nice, very nice sort of breakdown of skills involved in these things. And it's just a fantastic thing to check out.
That's a great qualifier, Jamie. Thanks for that. And our RANLab group, as I say, have a paper coming out with David Freshwater soon on the sub-provincial regional variation and potential for our province. And having that sub-provincial labor market functional economic region has been a focus of Vital Signs and for the Harris Center from the beginning. And I'm really glad Jamie highlighted that. We're almost out of time. I'll move to the final thank yous, Kathy. All righty. Well, thanks to the Community Foundation, as always, for this opportunity to collaborate. Thank you to our funding partners, Memorial's Office of Public Engagement, the YMCA of Newfoundland and Labrador, the CBDC Association, which represents the community business development corporations across the province, the government of Newfoundland and Labrador through their support for the Harris Center's Forecast NL initiative. Thank you to the Saltwater Network for this ongoing wonderful partnership. Thanks to the excellent graphic designers at Perfect Day. Thank you to all our contributors this year and the folks who helped us by reviewing materials and feeding us ideas and information. Their names are all listed at the back. Thank you especially to our project team. They're amazing. Kathy, Megan Rousel, Jamie, and Mandy Strickland. Kathy's leadership makes Vital Signs possible. So thank you, Kathy. I want to remind you all to visit the Harris Center website, mun.ca/Harris Center, to watch a recording of this session, tell your friends, and to find out about future events. We have a great Forecast NL session on the future of the fishery and oceans in the face of climate change, coming up on Tuesday, October 26th. Check out the Harris Center website for more information about that one. If you'd like copies of this year's Vital Signs, as Kathy mentioned, it'll be in the Telegram on the weekend, community newspapers, check the flyer bag on the next week. You can drop by Signal Hill campus, and we'll try to get some out to coffee shops and gas stations. And we'll be traveling whenever we can. I think I mentioned Megan Eibner and Mandy Rousel. Sorry if I didn't.
You got their names mixed up.
Oh, sorry. Bad notes. So sorry. Megan Eibner, amazing economist, came to our team. Mandy Rousel, Dr. Mandy Rousel, for her superb work. And if you'd like a copy of the Newfoundland and Labrador Since Confederation chart for your wall, get in touch. We'll send you one. And thanks to the team at the Harris Center for pulling the session together, of course. And most of all, thank you to all of you for viewing, for participating in the discussion that is Newfoundland and Labrador. It's only through an engaged population that we can make the most of this great place. And we're proud to be part of it. Look forward to more sessions coming up in the coming weeks and months. Take care. Have a great day.